Love. Some would say it took a backseat when the pandemic forced us apart. As a family-run and proudly Canadian-owned company, Charm Diamond Centers saw the need to bring us together with tales of love and created the Canadian Love Map podcast. Since then, we've shared hundreds of real, uplifting stories that prove love conquers all. So thank you for listening. We couldn't do it without you. And remember, love starts here. What the world needs now is love. More love.
Stars literally aligned.
He's always been the one.
There's someone out there for everyone.
I'm Nancy Regan, your host on the Canadian Love Map. We are on a journey to uncover and share love stories of all kinds.
He's never forgotten to bring me flowers.
We're hoping we're going to give a little good news to this world.
Even in these dark times, the life continues to go on.
It's all about compassion, devotion, adventure, and of course, love.
Everybody needs somebody. Everybody needs love.
This is the Canadian Love Map.
Well, love is the most important thing.
I don't mind being the vulnerable person anymore. And Kendra, God love her, taught me that. She was vulnerable to me. She laid it out, what she went through right away. She didn't come at me with any ego.
Today's love story belongs to Melanie and a long-ago schoolmate who bullied her. Though Melanie had been weighed down for decades by this traumatic high school experience, she eventually reached out and confronted the bully with courage and compassion. The unexpected result was a meaningful new connection that brought mutual healing and friendship. This is the Canadian Love Map. Melanie, hi. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Nancy.
Let's start with a message that you sent through social media that I'm guessing changed your life a little bit. Is that a fair characterization?
Absolutely, it did. I've been working on a memoir for a while, and it's about female sexuality. And I have a chapter that is related to women. And I had always seen this woman that had bullied me in high school on social media, on Facebook, friends of friends. I'd see pictures of her, and it was just like this gut stab. And it was like I was in high school all over again. And, in a memoir, you're ripping your guts out, trying to find truth and heal all of these things. And I said to myself, okay, deal with it. Message her, reach out. It's 35 years later, for God's sakes, get over it. And I was shaking as I was typing to her. And I said, what did I do? Why was I a target? I said, I'm writing this book and I want to know. I could see the little dots. She was messaging me right away. And I sat right down, took a deep breath, and I'm like, what's it going to be? What's she possibly going to say so quickly? 35 years later. And, just like I got nervous going to school, my hands got clammy, my mouth went dry. And then her message popped up, and it was right away. She said, I want to be clear. You did nothing wrong. And I didn't understand how much I carried this around, because as I worked through this chapter that I was writing about women, I actually had been bullied pretty much my entire grade school life. I was always the new kid. I was the one that wore my mother's hand-me-down. So right away I was a target, this weird kid. But in grade 10, I was friends with a girl that was flirting with one of her friends. And so I was guilty by association, but then also I was dating that someone she wanted. So she didn't think twice about taking what she wanted. But the other part, the biggest part of all that, was that she had revealed that during that time, she was going through her own trauma. She had layers of stuff that she had spent a decade working through in therapy. And all of a sudden I said, it clicked. Of course you did these things. And so, by her admitting that she was in the wrong, right away, she owned it. She didn't hide behind it at all. And then when she revealed her own damage of her life, I thought, wow, we're more alike than we are different.
It's a common saying now, but hurt people hurt people. When you sent her that first email, you said you asked her, what did I do? But did you also really lay out, here's how your bullying impacted me?
I did. I said every day I was fearful of going to school. I thought I did something wrong. I just felt anxious all the time. It was the first thing I thought about waking up in the morning. I dreaded going to school for months. For months, I hated going to school. Her friends' lockers were behind me. And so I would, turn my back to those lockers and start getting ready and putting my books. And then I would turn around and she was, like a few meters away from me. And I had to pass her to go to class. And then this is the other weirdest thing about trauma, Nancy. She reminded me that during a high school dance in the bathroom, she actually lunged at me and we had to be pulled apart. I didn't remember it until she started saying it. And then the images I was like, oh my God, yeah, I remember that now.
You mentioned a story that you wrote. Tell me about that.
So the story was for CBC. They have these first person narratives. I wrote that story now, I'm guessing about a year ago. That story within a 24 hours got something like 300 comments. It was crazy. I had strangers reach out to me saying, I can't believe, that you reached out. And then the other thing that struck me is that the majority of the comments were kind and empathetic. It sort of opened up a dialogue of people saying, I was a bully too. Yeah, it just seemed to be something that people wanted to talk about, to get off their chest.
And part of the reason the story blew up, as you say, is not just because you reached out to her and she came back with this response, but it grew from there. So tell me what happened after that very initial, the three little dots dancing, as you say, and that initial response. Where did it go from there?
I'm in British Columbia now. And so this story all happened in Dartmouth High School. And I said to her, I'm going to be in Halifax. Do you want to have dinner? And she's like, absolutely.
Could you even believe you were asking that?
No, it all feels, and it still feels surreal because sometimes I still look at that face of hers and I'm like, I'm still shocked that it is where it is today. Yeah.
But she accepted your invitation right away.
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone listening is as curious as I am to know how that unfolded.
I got to the restaurant nice and early, wondering what's it going to be like. Everyone came through the door and I'd be like, no, it's not her. No. and so when it was finally her, she showed up wearing a dress that I had the exact same pattern for. I was brought it with me to Halifax and I was going to wear it and I didn't wear it. Can you imagine we show up wearing the same outfit?
Wow. It's a lovely metaphor, though, to say
Mm-hmm.
there's some kind of connection here and we want to build it.
Yeah. So I got off the stool and we hugged. We just hugged and in our exchanges before we met, she said to me, your reaching out was a gift. And yeah, we sat down for several hours and just back and forth. And, oddly enough, we mentioned the guy but that was like maybe 2 minutes of like a 3-hour dinner. That was not the focus of our conversation. It was just so incidental. We talked about all the work that we had both been doing in therapy, all the similar trauma that we had to deal with. Talking about these things, we're like, wow, yeah, here we are. so similar, wearing that same dress. And we just bonded. What a relief.
You knew what her bullying did to you, but did you get a sense of what it did for her? How did it serve her to be bullying you, do you think, back in high school?
It gave her power. She said right away, she's like, yeah, I just belittling you made me feel stronger.
Gave her a sense of control too, I guess.
Control where she had no control at home or with all the things that she was dealing with. For her to be able to do that to somebody else, just it gave her some control.
Can you look back at that situation that was so deeply challenging then and see some way that it served you, that it made you who you are today somehow?
At the time, I couldn't see that. It made me mistrust women, especially groups of women. There's such a women's code. There's such a women's code about how you should behave and what you should look like. And so for the longest time, I just didn't trust groups of women. I had really close relationships with women on their own. But honestly, Nancy, it really didn't dawn on me how it affected me until I started writing about my relationship with other women. I have a whole chapter about it, and I just sort of started with Kendra because that was the most painful. But then I just started piecing together where it happened again, and then throughout my adult life, how I was very competitive and judgmental to other women. And I was like, oh, I do this to other women. I look at them and I start picking them apart and whittling them. And I'm like, yikes. I'm doing this. And then oddly enough, it wasn't until I was living in Toronto. This was only a few years ago, maybe 2015. And I started racing mountain bikes, just amateur, nothing Olympic or anything, and I became the member of the Wild Betties. It's like the only all women's female mountain biking group in Toronto and sort of the GTA area. And I remember my second race, the woman that had beat me the last time, she came up, she's like, oh, do you want to warm up together? And I'm like, what's your angle, lady? what are you after? And, and then, so we warmed up together and, I kept sort of stumbling behind her. She was just watching her. And then we went back to the corral right before the race. And she's like, oh, do you want a piece of gum? And I'm like, stop being so nice. I was like, I want to crush you. And then later, that woman became a dear, dear friend. She sent me this card maybe just a few months ago talking about how much my friendship means to her. And I'm getting married in August. And those women are coming out to British Columbia to not only ride bikes with me, but to celebrate my wedding with me. That handful of women that I was racing against all of a sudden became my greatest supporters, and they changed it for me.
We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centers. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. The process of writing a memoir, if you're being vulnerable and open, is therapy in itself because you've got to do a lot of digging. And one of the things I talked about was that I had trouble with groups of women and never felt comfortable in a group of girls. And I remember it now. I realized that, I was so focused on my deficits that I was threatened by other girls' or women's assets in my mind. And it wasn't until I stopped focusing on what I considered my deficits that I could connect in a more meaningful way with women. And I'm wondering how much that bullying made you focus on that sense of not enoughness that is such a part of the human condition.
Absolutely. And thank God for therapy, because, my therapist would say, like, if you keep comparing yourself, you're never going to be as good, or you're different. How can you possibly be the same as another individual? And as long as you keep doing that, you're going to always feel less than. It was just such a light bulb moment that took the pressure off it. And then, I look at my Wild Betties, and, we've done trips together. We've competed against one another. But I tell you, when I see one of those ladies through the bushes catching up with me, it makes me go faster. And when I see one of them celebrating something, it makes me want to be better. I used to feel threatened by those things. My quirkiness and my things that I used to just think were so weird and incorrect. They love that about me. And we complement one another.
I call that my dorky side. And it's true. Like, you make me a little emotional saying it the way you do, because I realize, yeah, my best friends love that dorky side of me.
Yeah, I can't hide it. It's, even when I teach fitness classes, and I don't mind being the fool anymore. I don't mind being the vulnerable person anymore. And Kendra, God love her, taught me that. She was vulnerable to me. She laid it out, what she went through, right away. There was no pretense. There was no, well, Melanie, I'm the one that's fine, like, what are you talking? There was nothing like that. She didn't come at me with any ego.
And she wasn't defensive at all, by the sounds of it.
Not at all. Not at all. She, like I said, she owned her poor behavior. She said it was abhorrent. I'm so sorry, over and over. I'm so sorry I did that to you. And, when you can come from a place of forgiveness, and when someone truly accepts it, I did. I accepted all of it from her. And months after our initial conversation a year ago, she calls me, like, it FaceTimes me once, and she's at the bar with all her girls. And and I'm looking at them, and I'm like, oh dear God, that's so-and-so from high school. And she's like, Mel, look who's here. We're all like, and I'm like, she's telling all her girls, and her girls are like, now I'm Facebook friends with all those girls. And so all of a sudden, it's like I'm aligned with these strong, fierce, beautiful women who years ago I was scared of. And then I also had these narratives about how their lives were, how their families must have been, because I was like one of the only kids in my friend group from a divorced single mom family. I put all of that narrative on me. And then all of a sudden, hearing Kendra's story and then knowing their stories, I was just, no, we all got our stuff. And then she made it okay to talk freely about that stuff, to talk about my mom's death, to talk about how I saw them as competition. That all just went away.
How much do you think self-acceptance played a role for both of you at that dinner when you met for the first time since high school?
Oh, it was huge. Even when we said goodbye, she just kept hugging me, and we held each other's hands, and she's like, you're okay. And because, writing this book, as you know, there's a memoirist who says, you get middle-aged and you think you want to, some people trying to deal with trauma turn to drugs to feel something real. Mm-hmm. And the writer's like, write your memoir. I guarantee you're going to feel something real. and at that dinner, Kendra was just like, you're okay. You're going to, because she knew I was still in the thick of writing about this stuff and feeling confident, and she could tell. And she's just like, no, you got this, girl. You're okay. And I start crying all over again. And I'm like, because yeah, it's you're never going to wake up and it's going to be 100% confident. You're never going to always feel like you got it. But you sure as hell got those women to go, no, you do. And that's where it really clicked, where I'm like, you can tell them that something's not okay. And they're going to say, I understand. I don't feel okay sometimes either. I pretended I had it figured out. I needed people to know I had it outwardly figured out because I didn't inside. And I thought, oh, as long as I look like I got it, I can fake it.
And when you tell other people that, all of a sudden you open a door for them to say, oh, that's how I feel, but I didn't know that other people felt like that.
Yeah, especially about the sexuality stuff, that we see this. I teach 20-year-olds at Western University in the undergraduate department. And I have such wonderful, most of my students are women, and I have such wonderful conversations with them about sexuality and gender and relationships and intimacy. And they're just like, I don't know. And I'm like, it's okay not to know. It's so okay not to know. You try to figure out, like, okay, you put aside what the world is telling you should want as a woman. And then you're like, what do I want?
I'm curious about how your newfound confidence and self-acceptance helped you start the podcast that you do, and tell us a little bit about it.
There just comes a time when you just get exhausted by caring so much. I think I remember Jane Fonda, who's a huge mentor of mine, who just said she woke up one morning, she's like, I'm so tired of caring so much what other people think about me. I'm so tired of presenting a certain way to make other people feel comfortable. And the podcast called The Sexy Times is talking to other women about, their first time losing their virginity. It's talking about menopause. It's talking about being single and dating, digital dating. So I get to talk. I have these lovely open conversations that just say, the hell with it, say it. There's so many things to be fearful of. That world outside our own door is so scary. Why are we so fearful of celebrating our bodies, our sexuality, what pleasures us, intimacy? That's the good stuff. That's the juicy stuff that makes us joyful. And I want women and men and everyone to be able to tap into that and celebrate feeling good. My partner says, let your freak flag fly. Whatever that color looks like, how nice that we can just be ourselves. So that's what the podcast is about.
I'm really curious now where your relationship with Kendra stands now.
We are at opposite sides of the country, which makes it quite difficult. I'm sure if we were in town, we would get together with, her and her girls. Of course we would.
But even if you don't continue a relationship going into the future, it seems like you've both played an incredibly powerful role in the other's life.
Absolutely. It was life-changing. It was just like, I remember having conversations with my mom before she died. My mom said to me, I did the best I could. And essentially, Kendra was saying, I was dealing with it the best I could, Melanie. And the minute you say that, the walls come down, and someone said, I gotcha. Yeah, I understand. If I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing, and I think that there's a whole layer, there's a whole backstory to why they're acting the way they're acting, You got to understand why people act the way they do. There's so much trauma. There's so much layers that you can't judge. You know, you have to be very open. And she helped me get there.
Thanks, Melanie, so much. I really appreciate you showing up here today.
Thanks so much, Nancy.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter. We love sharing love stories of all kinds, and that could include yours. So do you or someone you know have an uplifting tale to tell? Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram using @CanadianLoveMap or email producer@podstarter.io. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map.